Sure.
It's okay. So thank you, Katie and Grace, for agreeing to speak with us today. My name is Quinn Teague-Colfer, and I am the comms exec for the IRSOC this year.
And my name is Vamika Jain, and I'm the VP Communications at the IRSOC this year. We'd like to ask you some questions today on behalf of the IR community at U of T, and hope to connect you and the students in IR through this small interview.
So just to start off with, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your research interests? So kind of like, what are you focusing your PhD or your master's research on?
Katie, you could go first.
Okay, thanks. I'm Katie Davis. I'm a PhD candidate in the history department at U of T. My research focuses on the links between public opinion and nuclear diplomacy in the US during the early Cold War. So I'm interested in how average Americans experienced this new period of the atomic age and also the kind of burgeoning Cold War and the impact that their experiences had on US foreign policy. I'm in my 7th year and I'm just about finishing up. And I guess that's it for me.
Thank you and good luck on almost finishing up.
Thanks.
Grace?
Yeah, my name is Vliet. I'm a 2nd-year master's student at the Center for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies. We just call it CERES because it's a bit of a mouthful sometimes. And my research focuses on the historic interactions between France and Germany and how that kind of affects their relations today, specifically in regards to the European Union. I think that they have a very interesting kind of enemies to friends narrative that I really like, this sort of longer history. My major research project looks at the influence of the French right on these sort of political interactions during the Cold War between France and West Germany specifically. But overall, I just like anytime that the two of them interact, I think that interesting things are bound to happen.
Thank you so much. And sort of following up on that, you're a few years ahead of where we are all now, right now in our undergraduate careers. And I wanted to ask you, could you speak a little bit about your decision to pursue a career in academia and in history after completing your undergrad? Grace, do you want to go first for this one?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've always loved history, and I'm not sure if anybody here believes in destiny, but when I was younger, I would watch Night at the Museum over and over again. And I loved the story. I loved the way that historical figures would come to life. And I wish that I could talk to them as well. And so it's always kind of been a part of my life. And in the first sort of months of my undergrad, I remember sitting with some of my friends who were taking history classes as well. And they were sort of struggling with it. So I would sort of coach them and help them through it because I had a pretty good time with it. And I remember them telling me that they had a lot of fun with it and that I was having fun sort of teaching them, and sort of I realized how fulfilling that really felt. And then I decided from there on out, that's what I want to pursue. It's teaching and it's history. It's getting to talk about history, which is something that I love to do. And so it seemed like a natural fit.
I guess I'll go ahead and start now. When I applied to grad school, I remember my undergrad mentor, who's a political scientist, asked me, why are you doing a PhD in history? Which I always thought was funny. I started undergrad as a history major and actually switched to political science because of his direction. And then I switched back for my master's and my PhD to what I was like truly, where my heart truly was. But I've always been interested in IR, and I chose history to study IR from a historical perspective because I preferred the methodology. I like doing archival research, and I like that historians tell a story and foremost, and then from that story, we draw larger conclusions about the importance of processes and changes over time, rather than starting maybe with a theoretical contribution if we're looking at IR from a political science perspective. But because my research is in public opinion, I draw a lot on the social sciences too. And so I think my background in political science in undergrad really helped me to sort of grasp some of those theoretical concepts in a way that I might have had a harder time with if I had been only doing history for like my entire academic career. As far as doing a PhD, I don't really know why I started it, and I really learned a lot about myself from the process. I think like I was always really good at school and I enjoyed studying history. I enjoyed writing essays. Like Grace, I also really enjoyed teaching my fellow students. So that's been really the most fulfilling part of doing a PhD for me is the teaching assistant and course instructor aspects of it. So regardless of what I end up doing after I finish, I hope that I have some sort of teaching component to my future career. Academia in general is an extremely challenging job market right now. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but as I'm literally about to go out on the job market in probably about 6 months, I've had to kind of rethink what I might want to do with the rest of my life now that I'm finishing this big task of writing a dissertation, which will hopefully become a book in the next couple of years. And so looking at some kind of alternate academia jobs is what I've been focusing on now. I don't have a good answer to what job I might be interested in, but we'll see in the next couple of years what the job market looks like.
So I guess to change course a little bit, one of the purposes of the interview was to kind of give the students in TRN250 an opportunity to get to know you guys a little bit better outside of teaching and studying. So what kind of things are you guys reading, watching these days outside of teaching and researching to unwind?
Should I go first?
Oh yeah, Grace, you can go first, sorry.
Okay. I've been rewatching the HBO miniseries Chernobyl for about the upteenth time. I think it's fantastically done, and if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. It's amazing. As far as reading goes, I reread Roadside Picnic by the brothers Karamazov over Thanksgiving, and I recently picked up Isaac Asimov's I, Robot. I love sort of Cold War era science fiction, so it's been absolutely fantastic so far. I really, really enjoy it.
I'll second that Chernobyl is excellent, although quite disturbing, given that it's a true story. I've been watching The Queen's Gambit, which is a brand new Netflix series. I thought that it was going to be boring because it's about chess, but it's not really about chess. It's about feminism. It's about the Cold War, and it's really great. I highly recommend. I also have been watching The Expanse, which is a sci-fi series on Amazon. I absolutely love sci-fi, and The Expanse is actually kind of it's really a political show. It's about the relationship between different interplanetary societies in the like near distant future, like only a couple hundred years in the future from today. And the UN governs the Earth, which is a fascinating concept as someone who's interested in international relations. So I highly recommend if you can tolerate heavy science fiction, it had some really interesting political lessons, I guess, for us. As far as reading, because I read so much for school, I tend to read sort of more leisurely things, although recently I've been reading a lot of crime mystery books, which can be quite intense. A really good one I read recently is called In the Woods by Tana French. It's about 15 years old now, but it's a really like solid mystery psychological thriller story that has really good character development. It's extremely long, but like a this thick kind of book, but I really got into it and really enjoyed pursuing the mystery with the characters.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Grace. Yeah, on the note of historical fiction, my personal guilty pleasure is just reading female-centric SOE World War II historical fiction. So I'm actually looking forward to all the recommendations you just gave us. Okay, so coming back a little bit to careers in IR, we wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to students in the IR program and in TRN250 who are considering different careers in IR, and sort of what kind of matrix did you discover yourselves in to help make those decisions?
Do you want me to go first this time?
Yes, sorry,
okay.
Go for it.
Okay, so I think the IR program in general, one of the crucial benefits of it is the interdisciplinary approach of the program. So you'll become a lot more well-rounded by studying history, politics, economics, etc., from people who specialize in those fields. So like, for example, with TRN250, Professor Kislenko is a historian first and foremost, and he's teaching the history course. So I really encourage students to try to dive into each of their classes and learn what it means to think like a historian or think like a political scientist. And it will really augment your ability as an IR practitioner in the future to, in the real world, be able to draw on these many different disciplines. And then potentially, if you have another major or another minor or specialist, you might have an even broader approach of fields from which to draw on. So I think that interdisciplinary approach is really fantastic and will be very beneficial to participants in the IR program when they go into careers in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I second that interdisciplinary nature. It's a really, really good place to be in this program specifically because you do get to have a bit of everything. I think under more normal circumstances, my answer would be to travel, as campy as it sounds, to expose yourself to different cultures, really let yourself fall in love with the world. That's a little bit difficult now, but I think learning languages would be a fantastic piece of advice, as many as you can, to whatever degree of fluency you can manage. The popular ones, the obscure ones, just expose yourself to as many of them as you possibly can. And I think on the topic of being interdisciplinary, it might not be a bad idea to look at more regional studies and become a sort of regional expert in a place. And maybe I'm biased because I come from a regional center of studies and they really, really drive this home for us. But I think it's a really good thing to call yourself an expert on Hungary, an expert on the Middle East, on Southeast Asia, whatever sort of region or country or what have you. Learn that language for sure. And expose yourself to the history, the politics, pick a part of the world and obsess over it as much as you can.
Thank you. So I guess to finish off, we wanted to ask like a very kind of IR question. So like TRN250 is very much about tracing history through the age of the empires to now, I guess, kind of an age of nations. So where do you think IR is going next? I know that's a really tough question, but I guess, Katie, you could go first if you want. We'll pick on you.
Okay. So we've kind of been talking about like maybe age of globalization for the last 30 years or so, but we're really experiencing a reaction to that where nationalism is rearing its often very ugly head. In light of the US election today, that really is quite a poignant reminder for us. But I think that the challenges of the future, especially things like climate change, cybersecurity, nuclear proliferation, these demand closer international cooperation than we've ever had or needed before. One thing that's interesting in my discipline is that just a few days ago, the nuclear ban treaty just received its 50th ratifier, and that means that it's going to enter into force in January. But of course, the nuclear powers, none of them have even participated in the negotiations over this treaty. And so in order to tackle these truly big problems like nuclear proliferation, we really need more robust international organizations and a willingness to cede some national sovereignty for the sake of global safety. Will that happen? I don't know. I think it will take a big disaster to really shake people out of complacency. Sorry, that's a little bit of a pessimistic assessment, but hopefully I would like to see an age of greater international cooperation.
Thank you, Grace.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question, and I don't know if I have any sense of direction for where things are going, but I do have a lot of questions for what things might look like. You know, I sort of contemplate the role of, will it be, you know, a multipolar world? Will it be a more bipolar world? What do sort of supranational organizations like the European Union, what is their place? Are they more focused on domestic things, on international perceptions? I also wonder a bit about the role of non-state actors, you know, for better or for worse, things like NGOs, and what their role in sort of the international community might grow into as we sort of start to move. On one hand, we move away from conceptions of the nation state, but at the same time, like Katie mentioned, nationalisms are sort of stronger than ever, almost in response to that. So it's interesting and maybe a little bit concerning to see that those two issues are polarizing the way that they are. Nothing scares me as a historian more than political polarization, I think. But I think those are some of the questions that I wonder about when I think about what the future of international relations might look like.
Thank you so much to both of you. Yeah, and by the time this interview is out, we would know what happened at the U.S. elections. So let's hope maybe that gives a more optimistic angle to everything we talked about in this last question. But to end off, thank you so much on behalf of the IRSOC for taking the time to speak with us today. This is sort of our latest, I think it'll be the 7th episode of the Community Showcase. It was fantastic to be able to pick your brain, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed chatting with you all, and I hope that you find some of what we said helpful.
Yeah, thanks so much for organizing this. This was a lot of fun.